Hello, in this special series of audio videos, I will detail the contents of what I had written for each of the topics that I had addressed to the Prime Minister of Australia, in concern for the new proposals and current consideration of proposals that would in effect be adding more pressures, such as any additional taxes and policies that would, for the lower income and poor, cause more of a struggle for those less well off, who may be either that close to slipping under the poverty line or are already under the poverty line. I'll split these videos up since my letters, or call them documents, as the later documents amounted to a fair few pages, since I had addressed many assorted topics of concern. And since in order to publish these videos on YouTube, there is a limit to how long video can be to be uploaded. Please note that I had edited where any identifiable info may have been. And now that's all for this introduction. So let's begin with part 1 of the second letter I had written to the Prime Minister of Australia and had posted. Putting more pressure to the low income earner and the poor, to the Honourable Julia Gillard. From a concerned citizen, I have decided to write another letter and document outlining some of the issues as a continuation from the last letter I had sent, which I have included a copy of for your reference, in case you had not read it as yet. There are many issues that I will wish to discuss here, and many of these are in case your advisors had not examined the ramifications on how much this tax and any other taxes will do to the lower income earner and the poor. There was a statement which, as far as I am aware, you had once said, and was reported in 9MSN News. However, I am wondering if you had considered all types of people, or just who may only be aware of as a level of being most comfortable. The statement I repeat here, if this is true, that you had said. I understand that many people will be worse off, but without this and that hurt, this plan won't work. If this is true, that you had said the above statement, for which level of hurt had you considered? And in relation to the comfortable Australians that have their own house and can actually afford to go out, or did you mean the low income earners that are stuck having to rent, that also include the poor? I am not sure if you or your advisors had ever thought of the increased pressure on those that are struggling or even below the poor bracket. There is another part of this that is not going to be fair with this tax, since you're trying to tax the rich and wealthy, but they will only see this tax as only small change. Not to mention, they will then be able to afford and install a solar power system and maybe a small wind turbine, since they actually have and own their own house. The tax is not going to affect them that much, but for the lower disadvantaged who are forced to having to rent, it's going to affect it a big way, while these people will be the ones hurt, since we cannot afford our own house to own, and so we'll stick with the old taxed methods, since we have no ability to do anything to contribute, as there is nothing a renter is able to do, as it's not our property and are not allowed to alter or do anything in a rented place. So what could someone who is renting be able to do to survive better if they have no way to contribute? Not notable that for example, afford own their own place, and then be able to afford to purchase and install a solar energy solution. By doing this the way that you have outlined, is going to hurt the ones who are struggling the most to survive and keep themselves under a roof. Is there a future for the less well off? I fear that within a few years more people will be on the street and be struggling more to keep a roof over their head. Although we see the beginning of this problem, This will only increase that problem, and the salvos will struggle even more to help those, since it may get too expensive to even rent anymore. This is a problem that we see around the world, but it's becoming to be one here. I cannot believe that Australia, that we always knew as the lucky country, is going to be sliding down from that position, that belief. The forgotten to be swept under a rug is there is something that I have been noticing for some time around the world that relate to leaders, presidents, prime ministers, rulers, etc. That these days it seems to be the thing where when some leader comes to power, they tend to ditch the helping strategies they had promoted while campaigning for support. But once they are elected to office, they tend to be more concerned in their celebrity status, in keeping a good relationship only with other world leaders and rich investors. Yet they tend to have the opinion in relation to the lower working classes, where if people are under a certain level, i.e. cannot afford their own home, are then forgotten and swept under the rug, or in the case of when an event happens, are normally swept out of the city, which includes any APEC meetings when they come round, since it's not attractive for world leaders to see this side of life or be able to see any of the local problems visually, so these are cleared far away out of range. Now, I am sure that you're not one of them and that you really do care for all Australians. Am I right? Trust and a dedication to do what is right for the people in the country. There is one thing, and this I seem to believe, and yet it's so simple that I find it so surprising that many leaders seem to disregard or even realise. But as I like to say, if a leader can make the people happy and do what is right, then they may be voted to continue and remain in office. Then, since the people would trust that their leader would have the will to help and improve their country for all their people while tackling all the other issues that matter, and set an example of how a country can grow and make a difference. Make the people happy and they will keep you in office. But amazing that many of these leaders tend to only prefer to think of themselves than helping their country and their people. Rich vs low income, low affordability to live. The way this tax is being implemented will, as I have said before, be only helping the rich and will leave the renting low-income earner and the poor left out, guaranteeing them with no future. This tone sounds familiar if it were for a growing country like the Philippines or India, as an example, but we are not a country of corruption, and this too many over in those countries regard as having a corrupt government, who is more for the celebrity status than helping their own people, the ones that need that help, and supporting local business and trade while securing local jobs and employment, and help to secure a future for even the lower income brackets. I read your tax brochure the other day, and I noticed that there is supposed to be a little help for some, but that's only for households and families. There is no mention on a single person that is renting a unit that's worth so much less than what he/she has been forced to pay these days, and all because the interest rate rises and all the other rises of cost have pushed the values higher to the point where Australia has been considered one of the most expensive countries to live. Even our property investors are acquiring from overseas, since local properties have gone way over the top than they should be compared to the rest of the world. This was stated even in the Australian Financial Review some time ago, and I featured a comparison between housing and what you could get for $1 million between Australia, USA and Britain. So some investor of course, ours could not compare, especially if it were in Sydney though. That was in a newspaper I normally don't buy. Julia Gillard, I am generally saying that this, the way it's been implemented, will only benefit the rich. And how is the renting low income and the poor supposed to contribute to a better Australia when it is just getting to guarantee that they will never have a future? That's not Australia. You want us to cut back on energy usage. How am I supposed to do that? I don't have much myself, and I cannot cut back on anything since there is nothing I can cut back on. Yet I feel that, like many of us in the lower pay brackets, are being penalised for the habits of the rich and wealthy.